Hello everyone and welcome to my Y&R Trends channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The opulent silence of the Abbott Mansion Library, a room usually reserved for the quiet contemplation of corporate takeovers or the gentle rustle of turning newspaper pages, was thick with a tension that felt both alien and suffocating. It was a silence born not of peace, but of a profound gut-wrenching absence. Kyle Abbott stood by the cold, empty fireplace, his posture rigid, the usual easy confidence he carried himself with entirely evaporated. He was staring at a faint lighter-colored rectangle on the wallpapered wall, a ghost imprinted upon his home and his heart. That was where it had hung for as long as he could remember, the sacred anchor of his most cherished memories, the family photograph of himself as a young boy, standing between his mother, the late Diane Jenkins, and the man he had believed his entire life to be his father, John Abbott. The photograph was more than ink and paper. It was a testament to a love he had clung to, a narrative of a stable and happy childhood that had formed the bedrock of his identity, especially in the tumultuous years following his mother's presumed death. Now the space was a void, a physical manifestation of the betrayal that was currently twisting his insides. His wife, Summer, watched him from the doorway, her own expression a mixture of fury and profound sorrow, her arms crossed tightly as if to physically hold herself together against the emotional storm that had shattered their domestic peace. The catalyst for this tempest, the single point from which all this pain radiated, was a young woman named Sienna. She had entered their lives not with a bang, but with the quiet, unassuming demeanor of someone needing a fresh start, and Kyle, ever the champion of the underdog, had offered her one. He had given her a job, a sense of purpose, and most foolishly in hindsight, his trust. Sienna, with her seemingly grateful eyes and eager-to-please attitude, had been given the run of the house, a privilege she had exploited with breathtaking coldness. The transaction itself was almost comical in its simplicity, a brutal lesson in how the most sacred things can be reduced to mere commodities. She hadn't smashed a window in the dead of night, she hadn't picked a sophisticated lock. She had simply taken the photograph from its place on the wall, a place she had seen Kyle pause before countless times with a soft, wistful smile, and she had sold it. The act was so brazen, so devoid of any moral compass, that it was difficult to even comprehend. The money, a paltry sum when weighed against the emotional value of what she'd stolen, had presumably been spent on some fleeting necessity or desire, the transaction itself lost to the impersonal ether of online marketplaces or a quick, anonymous sale to a less than scrupulous collector. The why was almost irrelevant, a sordid tale of desperation or greed that paled in comparison to the devastating what. The photograph's absence was a wound that festered differently in each person it affected. For Kyle it was a double betrayal. First, there was the raw, personal violation of having a cherished memento of his mother stolen by someone he had tried to help. Diane's history was complicated, fraught with mistakes and a legacy of manipulation, but to Kyle she was just Mom. The woman in that photograph, smiling without a care in the world, her arm wrapped protectively around her young son, was the pure, uncomplicated version of the mother he had lost and miraculously regained. The image was a tangible touchstone to a happier, simpler time before the complexities of adult life, corporate espionage, and paternity revelations had clouded his world. Its loss felt like losing a piece of her all over again, a fresh grief layered upon the old. But the second, more insidious layer of the betrayal was tied directly to the other man in the photo, John Abbott. For most of Kyle's life, John was his father. He was the man who taught him to ride a bike, who instilled in him the Abbott family values of honor and integrity, whose large, steadying presence was the cornerstone of his universe. The photograph was proof of that bond, a visual affirmation of a father's love. But then the truth had emerged, the shattering revelation that his biological father was actually Jack Abbott, John's son. The photograph in a new light became a beautiful, painful lie. Yet for Kyle it was a lie he cherished because the love within it was real. John's love was real. To have that complicated, precious artifact stolen stripped him of a crucial piece of his history, forcing him to confront the ghost of his paternity crisis all over again, leaving him feeling unmoored and violently angry. For Victoria Newman, the theft was a different kind of earthquake, one that shook the very foundations of the new life she was so carefully and tentatively building. The photograph was not merely a picture of her husband's past. It was a direct link to her son. The little boy in that photo, the one with Kyle's youthful grin, was the same child that Kyle and his first wife, Summer, had given up for adoption, a child Victoria and her husband, Cole, had since discovered was their biological son, given away in a twisted series of events orchestrated by Eve, the boy's adoptive mother. Finding their son, whom they had named John Abbott Newman, but who was known as Ian Ward, had been a miracle, a chance to heal a wound that had festered for years. The stolen family photo was one of the only visual records Victoria had of her son's early childhood, a period she had missed entirely. She would look at that photograph and try to imagine the boy he was in that moment, to fill in the blanks of the years stolen from her. It was a painful but necessary connection, a way to stitch the past to the present. For Sienna to steal that, to treat it as a piece of disposable merchandise, was an act of such profound cruelty that it left Victoria breathless with a cold, focused rage. It wasn't just a theft, it was a violation of her motherhood, a theft of her memories by proxy, an attack on the fragile bridge she was building to the son she was only just getting to know. Every time she looked at the empty space on Kyle's wall, she didn't just see a missing picture. She saw another piece of her son's life that had been carelessly tossed away, and the pain of that was a physical, aching thing in her chest. The fallout was immediate and corrosive, seeping into the very air of the Abbott and Newman households. Suspicion, once a dormant seed, began to sprout into ugly, accusatory vines. In the frantic, heart-pounding hours after the photo was discovered missing, before Sienna's culpability was known, fingers were pointed in the most destructive of directions. Kyle's initial, gut-wrenching suspicion fell upon his own father, Jack. The history between Jack and Diane was a battlefield, littered with the shrapnel of old betrayals and passionate, toxic love. Jack had every reason to want a piece of Diane's history with John Abbott erased. It was a constant visual reminder of a time when the woman he loved had belonged to his own father. The logic was twisted, born of panic and past hurts, but it was enough to cause a seismic rift between father and son. The accusations flew, harsh and unforgiving, in Jack's office at Jabot, a place that had witnessed countless business battles but few personal ones as raw as this. Jack's denials were met with Kyle's furious, grief-stricken certainty, and the bond between them, which had only recently been repaired after the revelation of their true biological relationship, was strained to its absolute breaking point. It was a masterful demonstration of how a single selfish act by one person could send shockwaves through an entire family system, turning allies into adversaries and love into bitter suspicion. The trust that had taken years to build was shattered in a single afternoon, all because of a missing piece of paper in a frame. When the truth finally emerged, it did so not with a dramatic confession but through the patient, meticulous work of Summer. Refusing to let the violation stand, she had become a detective in her own home, piecing together Sienna's movements, her financial desperation, and the faint digital trail she had left behind. Confronting Sienna was a scene of stark contrasts. Summer, all righteous fury and polished intensity, facing down a girl who seemed to shrink under the weight of her own pathetic actions. Sienna's confession was not one of defiant villainy, but of sniveling, self-pitying excuse. She offered up a story of being backed into a corner, of bills she couldn't pay, of a desperation that made the unthinkable seem necessary. She pleaded for understanding, for forgiveness, her tears a shallow performance that failed to mask the sheer calculation of her crime. She had not stolen a piece of jewelry or a stack of cash. She had deliberately chosen the one object whose value was purely sentimental, knowing its loss would cause maximum emotional devastation, while presumably believing its intangible worth would make it less likely to be pursued as a serious theft. This cold calculation, more than the act itself, revealed the true darkness of her character. The aftermath of her exposure was a whirlwind of termination, of being cast out from the world of privilege and second chances she had been allowed into, her name becoming a synonym for treachery and ingratitude in the parlors of Genoa City's elite. But the exposure of the thief did not bring the solace one might expect. The photo was still gone. Its physical absence was a constant, nagging reminder of the breach of trust. For Kyle and Victoria, now bound together in this strange, shared grief, the quest to recover it became an obsession. It was no longer just about the picture itself, but about reclaiming a piece of their stolen history, about refusing to let Sienna's act be the final word. They embarked on a frantic, citywide search, a mission that felt at times both hopeless and utterly necessary. They contacted every pawn shop, every antique dealer, every online auction house and private collector they could think of. They described the frame, the exact dimensions, the slight fade in the corner from years of sunlight. They retraced Sienna's steps, trying to imagine which seedy establishment or anonymous online forum she might have used to offload her loot. The process was exhausting and emotionally draining, each dead end feeling like a fresh loss. It forced them to relive the pain over and over again, to describe the preciousness of the item to disinterested strangers who only saw a potential price tag. In this shared mission, however, an unexpected alliance was forged. Kyle and Victoria, whose relationship had always been cordial but distant, bound by their connection to Harrison and the complex web of Numanabit dynamics, found common ground in their mutual desperation. They were two parents from different worlds, united by the love for a child and the devastation of having a piece of his story violently torn away. The eventual recovery of the photograph, when it came, was not a moment of cinematic triumph, but one of quiet, profound relief tinged with a new, permanent sadness. It was found in a small, cluttered curio shop on the outskirts of Genoa City, tucked away between garish porcelain figurines and dusty old lamps. The shop owner, a kindly, oblivious man, had purchased it for a song, seeing it as just another nice, old-fashioned family portrait. He had no knowledge of the anguish contained within the glass of the frame. When Kyle laid eyes on it, his knees nearly buckled. There they were, his mother, his grandfather, his younger self, frozen in time, smiling back at him as if nothing had happened. He reached out a trembling hand to touch the glass, half expecting the image to dissolve like a mirage. Purchasing it back felt like the ultimate injustice, paying a price to reclaim what was rightfully his, but he would have paid 1,000 times the amount. He took it home, holding it as carefully as one would carry a holy relic. He cleaned the glass, wiping away the faint smudges of Sienna's fingerprints and the dust of the shop, a symbolic act of purification. But when he went to hang it back on the wall, he paused. The wall itself no longer felt safe. The innocence of that space was gone, forever tainted by the memory of the violation. The photograph, which had once been a source of uncomplicated comfort, was now also a reminder of profound betrayal. It was still cherished, still loved, but its meaning had been irrevocably complicated. In the end, the story of Sienna selling the family photo was about far more than a simple theft. It was a brutal exploration of how objects can become vessels for our most profound emotions: love, loss, identity, and family. It demonstrated with painful clarity that the value of a thing is not in its material worth, but in the memories it holds and the stories it tells. For Kyle, the returned photograph was a testament to resilience, a symbol that even though trust can be broken and homes can be violated, the love of family, however complicated, endures. He would look at it now and see not only the happy family he once believed he had, but also the strength he found in fighting to get a piece of it back. For Victoria, having the image returned meant she could once again gaze upon the face of her son as a little boy, a precious, irreplaceable glimpse into the past she had missed. The wound left by Sienna would scar over, but the photograph would forever bear the invisible crack of that betrayal. The incident left a permanent mark on all involved, a chilling lesson that the greatest threats to a family's peace are not always the corporate rivals or the long-lost enemies scheming in the shadows, but sometimes the quiet, unassuming person you invite into your home, who with a single callous act, can teach you the precise, devastating cost of a memory, and the fragile nature of the walls we build to protect them. Sienna stood alone in the dimly lit corner of her apartment, the faint hum of the city outside pressing through the window. Her fingers trembled as she stared down at the worn photograph in her hand, a family portrait of Kyle, Victoria, and little Claire. The glossy paper felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. It wasn't just a picture. It was leverage, a piece of someone's private world that didn't belong to her. Yet she knew exactly how valuable it was. That picture, captured at a family event that was never meant to see the light of day, held secrets that could shift the balance of power in Genoa City. Sienna wasn't proud of what she was about to do, but survival in this town didn't come easy. You either played the game or got swallowed by it. For days, she'd been haunted by the moral weight of her choice. She had crossed paths with Kyle Abbott more than once, and though she knew him only on the surface, A man of charm and corporate cunning, she'd seen the softer side too. His love for his son Harrison and his loyalty to his family ran deep. The photograph captured that very essence. Kyle with his arm around Victoria, smiling in a rare, genuine moment, while Claire stood in front of them, her small hands clutching a red balloon. It looked so pure, so untouchable, that it almost made Sienna sick to think she was selling it. But she had debts, and debts didn't forgive emotion. She had been pulled into a spiral of lies, favors, and threats, and now this was her way out. Someone had offered her money, real money, for proof that Kyle and Victoria had shared more than just a business alliance. The rumors had already started swirling through the grapevine of Genoa City's elite, whispering that Kyle and Victoria were closer than they appeared. At first, people brushed it off as gossip. After all, Victoria Newman was known for her intensity and independence, not for indulging in scandal. But when Claire reappeared in their lives, calling both Kyle and Victoria Mom and Dad, in an emotional moment that had been witnessed by a few unlucky souls, things changed. No one knew the full story, not even Claire herself, it seemed. And that's what made the photograph so dangerous. It could fuel speculation that Claire's true parentage was more complicated than anyone imagined. As Sienna walked to the small cafe where she was supposed to meet the buyer, her heart pounded in her chest. Every step felt like a betrayal. She kept replaying the moment she found the photograph, tucked inside a discarded envelope at Newman Media's storage room, where she sometimes freelanced doing photo edits. Someone must have left it there by mistake, but Sienna recognized an opportunity when she saw one. She told herself she'd return it, that she wouldn't stoop so low. But then the call came. The mysterious voice offering her $10,000 in cash for any proof of Kyle and Victoria's family connection. She tried to ignore it at first, but desperation has a way of changing your principles. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria was sitting in her office at Newman Enterprises, scrolling through her emails when she saw something that made her stomach twist. An anonymous message, no subject, no signature, but one attachment, a blurred preview of that same photograph. Her hands froze. She opened the image and her heart nearly stopped. She remembered that day vividly. It had been a private family gathering at the Abbott estate, one of those rare afternoons where everything felt normal. Claire had insisted on a picture, and Kyle had happily obliged, wrapping an arm around Victoria as if they were a family of three. It had been innocent, a sweet moment frozen in time, but now it looked like something far more intimate. The email had only one line. "What's it worth to you to keep this out of the public eye?" Victoria's pulse quickened. She immediately called Kyle. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tight. Kyle arrived within the hour, tension written all over his face. He took one look at the photo and clenched his jaw. "This is insane," he muttered. "Someone's trying to make it look like we're..." He couldn't finish. Victoria didn't need him to. The implications were clear. If this went public, it would not only hurt their reputations, but also destroy the delicate stability they'd built around Claire. The girl had already suffered enough, learning about her troubled past, being caught between the Newmans and the Abbotts, and now this? It could shatter her completely. Back at the cafe, Sienna slid into a corner booth, clutching the manila envelope that held the original photo. The man she was supposed to meet was already there, wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low. He looked ordinary, but his demeanor screamed danger. "Do you have it?" he asked without preamble. Sienna nodded, placing the envelope on the table. He slid an envelope of his own toward her, presumably filled with cash. For a moment she hesitated, her conscience clawing at her. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. The man smiled faintly. "Let's just say I work for someone who likes to know where the power lies in this town." She didn't ask further. She just took the money, shoved it into her bag and left. But as soon as she stepped outside, guilt consumed her. The fall wind cut through her coat, and she felt cold, colder than she'd ever felt. She didn't notice the dark sedan parked across the street, nor the pair of eyes watching her through tinted glass. Inside the car, the man made a quick call. "It's done," he said. "We have the photo." When Kyle and Victoria finally traced the source of the blackmail to Sienna, it was already too late. The image had begun circulating among Genoa City's gossip circles. Someone posted a pixelated version online with a headline suggesting that Victoria and Kyle had been secretly raising a child together. Newman Media tried to suppress it, but the story took on a life of its own. The press swarmed them both, demanding answers. Claire, confused and frightened, couldn't understand why everyone was talking about her parents. "Why are they saying I have two dads?" she asked tearfully one evening, clutching her stuffed animal. Victoria tried to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Hal was furious. "I'll find out who did this," he vowed, slamming his fist on the table. But underneath the anger was something else, fear. He'd worked hard to maintain his image, his career, his relationships. He couldn't afford another scandal, especially not one involving Victoria Newman, whose family already had enough drama to fill volumes. But deep down, a part of him also hurt because the photo wasn't entirely false. It had captured something real, something unspoken between him and Victoria. The way she looked at him that day, the warmth in her eyes, the connection they both pretended wasn't there. It all came rushing back.